This is a Colnago C68, a £10,000 superbike, which I've been, amazingly, riding for the past 6 months. And in this video, I'll share what it's like to live with such an expensive bike and talk about performance, ride quality, handling and comfort, and whether it's worth that money, and share some likes and gripes as well. So I'm David, you're watching Just Ride Bikes. Let's dive in. The C68 is the latest in a long line of C-Series Italian-made carbon fibre frames from the famous Italian bike brand. The original C40 was launched way back in the early 90s and was a carbon frame that proved the material could work in an era of steel frames. It was tough enough for the toughest bike races in the world, like Paris-Roubaix. But this new frame is a big step forward and a big departure from every frame that came before it. And there is one elephant in the room we need to talk about first: the lack of the founder, Ernesto Colnago's signature on the top tube. Now, clearly this will upset some older viewers and some purists who love this brand. It's held in such high esteem. But in the same way that the passing of Enzo didn't stop people from buying Ferrari cars, I don't think the lack of his signature will stop people from buying this frame. The other big change with the C68 is not in how it's made, but how it looks. It's still at heart a tube and lug frame, which goes right back to the original C40. But now the lug's been stretched out to form modules. So you can see the down tube into head tube, the head tube into top tube, the rear stays as one assembly, and the bottom bracket, now a T47, into down tube, seat tube, and rear stays. And that change means it's not as distinctive as the C64, which this bike replaces. But having lived with the bike for the last 6 months, the looks have grown on me. And while I do miss the distinctive looks of the old C64, I think it's a smart and necessary move in today's market. Because put the old C64 alongside something like a Tarmac SL7, say, and it's old-fashioned and traditional. Put this alongside that Tarmac, and it looks modern and an interesting rival to that very popular race bike. And up close in person, it's a gorgeous frame to look at, and the quality of the frame is first class. It really is. From taking out the packaging to building it and to riding it every day, it's a bike of first class quality. We have details like a T47 oversized threaded bottom bracket, full internal cable routing, a brand new one-piece aero handlebar and stem. We have the same D-shaped seat post as on the V4 RS and a neat internal seat clamp, and the seat post hasn't slipped during my 6 months of riding the bike. The C68 isn't the lightest frame in the world, at a claimed 930 grams for a size 51, which I have here, which equates to a 55cm frame. If you want a lighter frame, a Tarmac SL7, Giant TCR Advanced SL, Trek and Monda SLR will be lighter, and even the company's own brand new V4 RS will be a lighter option. Indeed, if you want a faster, racier bike, then a V4 RS is probably a better bet. This bike though shares almost the same geometry as a V4 RS, so the ride quality will be very similar. I haven't ridden the V4 RS yet, can't wait to get my hands on that bike and see how it compares to this bike, and whether the C68 still has a place compared to that V4 RS. In the old days, before the V-Series was developed, the C-Series was the go-to race bike from Colnago. It used to be raced in the Tour de France very successfully indeed. But in latter years, as bikes have become more aero, stiffer and lighter, the C-Series has been positioned more as a gentleman's racer, a bike for going 70% between cafe stops rather than 100% and inducing lactic hell. But this shift with the C68, with this modern looking frame, is clearly an attempt to make it appeal to a younger audience, an audience who might buy that Tarmac SL7 as an example, but try and sway them to this bike instead. Let me share some likes with the C68, starting with the Ceramic Speed SLT headset bearings. These are solid bearings in the headset, which means no maintenance, and after 6 months they're still running really smooth, silky smooth, despite riding through rain, snow and all sorts of bad weather. and with full internal cable routing being a nightmare to replace bearings, that's a really nice move. I also really like the Aero one-piece handlebar on this bike. Got a lovely shape, compact drops, short reach, nice flat ergo tops, and a good reach for my fit. I like the fact we have space for 30mm wide tyres. These are 28 and there's loads of space between the rubber and the frame. So you get maximum comfort from a C68 for dealing with rough roads. I also like the fact we have a T47 bottom bracket, an oversized threaded bottom bracket. I've also got a ceramic speed bottom bracket in there and still silky smooth after 6 months of riding. And I've had no maintenance issues at all. And now for some dislikes. Starting at the front with a bike computer mount. It's not the greatest in the world and a bit of an afterthought and not very premium on a premium frame. This is a fairly unique road bike in having a multi-tool inside the stereo tube here. A good idea in theory, perhaps, but not a great idea in real life. For starters, I always forget it's there, so you carry around extra weight for no reason with a multi-tool in your saddlebag or jersey pocket. The other thing I really dislike is it's really tricky to get the cap out of the stem, and then when you get it out, the multi-tool bits are really small. Okay, in an emergency perhaps, but not as good as a proper multi-tool in my experience. So a nice idea, but not that well executed, and personally, I leave it at home. This frame is also fairly unique in having an NFT on a down tube, but call me old, I've no idea what it means, what it does, or what it's for, and seems a bit of a gimmick to me. But the biggest gripe is the price. Now I get bikes are expensive these days, and this frame is made in Italy, which I totally appreciate, but this bike costs £10,000 and it's not even top of the range. We have a second tier Ultegra group set with Ultegra wheels. If you went for a flashier build like Dura Di2 or Campagnolo Super Record EPS with a nice MV wheel, say, you're probably looking at close to £15,000, and that is an eye-watering amount of money. £10,000 is just insane. I can't get my head around that at all, just a serious amount of cash indeed. So is it worth the money? Well, yes and no. It won't really be that much faster than a bike costing half this or a fifth of the price of this bike here, because ultimately it's down to your fitness and your legs that determines how fast you go. But for sheer ride quality, luxury, refinement, this bike is outstanding. And then we have the history, the legacy and the heritage of the company, and the fact the frame is made in Italy in the same way it's been made for the last 40 years, but brought bang up to date. Now, somebody asked me the other day how it compares to my giant TCR Advance that I've been riding for the last 2 years, which I still ride on a regular basis. Now, when riding both bikes back to back on the same roads that I know really well, with a power meter, using the same wheels and tyres, the C68 does have the edge. There's a difference, it's small, but it is there. But the biggest difference is in the ride quality. Now, a TCR is a lovely bike. I love the way that bike rides. But the C68 is another level of refinement, of ride quality, of stiffness and smoothness. It does everything the TCR does, but even better. Only by a few tenths here or there, but enough difference to be tangible. Whether that's worth the extra money of the C68 over the TCR is another matter. But if you want the best of the best, then the C68 is definitely a bike to put on your short list, although you might have to save up quite a bit to afford it. The way this bike rides is just incredible. Now, I'm a lucky boy. I get to ride lots of nice bikes, expensive and not so expensive. And this C68 is definitely one of the nicest bikes I've ever ridden. The ride quality is simply first class. It's so good. It's super stiff when you push hard on the pedals and climbing and sprinting, but then the ride comfort is fabulous. With these 28mm wide tyres, the smoothness on my rough roads is up there with the best. That balance of stiffness for sprinting, for riding hard, yet enough comfort for long days in the saddle, it's just remarkable. I love the geometry and the fit on this bike. This is a size 51, which equates to a 55, and the geometry is essentially the same as the more aero and lighter and newer V4 RS. And my favourite detail is the head angle, which is slacker at 71.8 degrees than the more common 73 of a Specialized, Trek or Giant. And that makes it super stable at any speed and a really relaxed ride manner. It's not twitchy or nervous, it's super planted all the time, and it's definitely not a laid back Gran Fondo bike. Pretty low at the front and pretty stretched, similar stack and reach to a Tarmac or a TCR, and I prefer that. I like being nice and low at the front, getting aero for longer rides, whilst I still got enough flexibility to cope with it. And it's definitely a fast bike. I haven't put it through a wind tunnel or done any scientific testing, but I don't need to. Riding it for 6 months on my local roads that I know so well, and riding it against my TCR and other test bikes like Trek Madone, this bike is right up there. It harnesses your fitness, takes whatever you got and makes best use of it. And I reckon it's faster than my TCR and not much slower than that Madone. I can't wait to see how it compares to that newer V4 RS. The comfort is amazingly good, given how stiff it is when you're sprinting, climbing, really mashing on the pedals. The smoothness of my rough roads is just wonderful. I can ride it all day long and not feel beaten up. That balance of stiffness and comfort is just fantastic. And putting all the usual stuff about speed and weight and stiffness to one side, this bike is just a joy to ride. I look forward to riding it. It puts a smile on my face when I'm riding it. And when I'm done riding it and look back at it, it makes me smile again. It's such a lovely bike to ride. It rides in a way that a few bikes can really match. So if I had the money and I wanted something that's contemporary whilst making a nod to its heritage and definitely stand out at a cafe, well, I'll be saving long and hard for a C68. What a bike, what a bike, just amazing. This is what I love about bikes, the way they make you feel, the smile they put on your face. And if you're wondering how the brand new C68 compares to a 20-year predecessor in the lovely C50, then watch this video up here as I rode both bikes back to back on the same road to see how to compare. And the results were very interesting indeed.